In the bustling town of Okija, wealth flowed through the hands of Peter and Elna like an unending river. Theirs was a life of opulence, their estate towering above the sprawling townships to the outside world. Peter was a self-made tycoon, his rise to prominence a story of grit and brilliance. Few knew the dark secrets that fueled their success. Elna, born of the ancient Njoku clan, carried a bloodline that thrummed with mystic power. It was said that the women of their family could bend fate to their will, their magic tied to rituals older than memory itself. But this power came at a cost. Each blessing demanded an offering, and the greater the blessing, the steeper the price. Peter had fallen in love with Elna's beauty and grace, blind to the dark horror that clung to her like a shadow. Only after their marriage, when his struggling venture began to flourish overnight, did she reveal the truth. At first, Peter recoiled from the revelation, but Elna dignified the power, framing it as a gift meant to elevate them above the mediocrity of life's struggles. "Peter," she had said, her voice calm yet commanding, "this is our legacy, our chance to reshape our destiny. All it demands is respect and an offering, a single life in exchange for untold prosperity." Peter, seduced by the promise of wealth and Elna's unwavering resolve, agreed. Together, they whispered their pact to the ancestral spirits of the Njoku's lineage. The child Elna carried would be their sacrifice. The ritual was performed under the crimson light of a blood moon, in a clearing deep within the forest. Elna, draped in ceremonial beads and painted with sacred sigils, knelt before a blazing fire. Peter stood behind her, his hands trembling as he held a carved wooden bowl. As Elna chanted the ancient incantation, the air thickened with an unnatural stillness. The wind ceased, the fire burned impossibly high, and the ground trembled as though the earth itself bore witness to their sin. When the ritual was complete, Elna fell silent. Her unborn child, barely a whisper of life within her, was gone. In its place, the spirits left a mark, a coiled black serpent etched onto her wrist, a living sigil that pulsed within every beat of her heart. Their wealth grew exponentially after that night. Businesses boomed, lands prospered, and Peter's name became synonymous with power. But while Peter reveled in their future, Elna grew distant, her spirit burdened by the weight of their choice. After the ritual beneath the blood moon, Peter and Elna's life brimmed with wealth, but their hearts were weighed down by an emptiness they hadn't anticipated. They tried desperately to conceive again, yearning to fill the void left by their dark bargain. But year after year passed without a sign of life stirring in Elna's womb. Doctors assured them that there was nothing wrong, but deep in her heart, Elna contemplated the truth. Maybe the spirit had taken more than their unborn child. They had cursed her womb. Elna withdrew from society, retreating into her own world of guilt and silent prayers. Peter, too, grew colder, burying himself in his work, avoiding the subject of their lost child and the unseen forces that haunted their lives. Their once gilded life felt hollow. One afternoon, Elna ventured out to the bustling market in Okija. The air was thick and with scent of roasting maize and spices. For the first time in months, she allowed herself a moment of distraction, running her fingers over colorful fabrics and inspecting handmade jewelry. As she turned a corner near the edge of the market, she nearly collided with a figure hunched on the dusty road, a madman. His hair was matted, his clothes tattered, and his eyes burned with an unsettling intensity. He was known in the town for his wild proclamations and cryptic mutterings, and most people avoided him. But today, the madman seemed to be waiting for her. "Elna of Njoku blood," he rasped, his voice low and gravely. Elna froze, her blood turning to ice. He had never seen this man before, yet he spoke her name with a certainty that pierced through her. "What did you say?" she whispered, He laughed, a harsh, guttural sound. "You carry life within you," he said, pointing a gnarled finger at her stomach. "A child, strong and pure, untainted by the path you and your husband walk." Elna staggered back. "That's impossible," she said, clutching her abdomen. The madman's face grew grave. "The spirits have been deceived, but they will not stay silent. The child is beyond their reach, marked by forces older and greater than the Njoku. He will not walk your path of wealth and blood." "What does that mean?" Elna demanded, her voice shaking. The madman tilted his head, as if listening to something only he could hear. "You will see," he said critically. "The child will grow, and with him, your sins will grow too. It's your salvation and your undoing." Before Elna could respond, the madman turned and shuffled away. Laughing to himself, she stood rooted to the spot, her heart pounding. Could it be true? Could she truly be pregnant after all these years? Weeks later, her suspicion was confirmed. She was indeed with child. Elna kept the news from Peter at first. Her heart torn between joy and fear. The words of the madman haunted her. What did it mean that the child would not walk their path? When she finally told Peter, his reaction was a mixture of disbelief and elation. "This is our second chance," he said, holding her hands tightly. "We'll protect this child no matter what." But as her pregnancy progressed, strange things began to happen. The serpent mark on Elna's wrist darkened, coiling tighter, as though resisting the life growling within her. Nightmares plagued her, visions of shadowy figures circling the child. Sometimes, she woke to the whispers in the air, voicing hissing, "He's not yours to keep." When Elias was born, the air seemed to shift. He came into the world on a stormy night, the rain battering their estate as if the heavens themselves were protesting its arrival. From the moment he opened his eyes, they gleamed with an otherworldly light, and Elna felt both awe and dread. As Elias grew, it became clear he was unlike any other child. He was kind and intelligent, but seemed immune to the allure of wealth and power. He shunned the extravagance around him, preferring to spend time among the villagers, helping the poor and tending to the sick. Peter grew frustrated. "Why does he reject everything we've built for him?" he would ask Elna. But Elna remained silent, haunted by the madman's words. She began to see signs that Elias' purity was more than a personality trait, it was a shield. The Njoku spirit could not touch him, and the fury began to turn toward her. Elna knew the day would come when the spirit would return, furious and unrelenting. The mark on her wrist had begun to burn again. It once curled serpent, breathing as if alive. The whispers in the shadows grew louder, and the air in the house felt heavier, like the weight of the gorge itself pressing down on her. She had hoped, prayed, that Elias would be the end of it, that the miracle child foretold by the madman would sever the connection to the spirit and grant her family peace. But she saw the spirit came for her and Peter. One fateful night, as the winds howled and thunder shook the ground, Elna stood in the middle of the living room, the glow of the fireplace casting long shadows on the walls. Peter sat in his chair, his glass of brandy untouched, his eyes fixed on the serpent mark that now slithered visibly beneath Elna's skin. "They want a sacrifice," Elna said quietly, her voice barely audible over the storm outside. Peter looked up, his face pale. "You said it was done. You said the covenant ended with the child we gave them." "It should have," Elna replied, her voice trembling. "But Elias is beyond their reach. They can't touch him. So now they've turned to us." Peter stood, his fists clenched. "No, I won't let them take my son. And I won't let them take me either." Elna turned to him, tears streaming down her face. "It's not a choice, Peter. The spirits are unyielding. If we don't give them what they want, they would destroy everything, the house, the wealth, the land. Everyone in this village will suffer for our sins. Is that what you want? Peter shook his head, his voice breaking. I won't die for this. We did what they asked. We gave them a life. That should have been enough. Elna stepped closer, her expression hardening. It wasn't. And now, it's yours, oh Elias. Peter stared at her, his face a mixture of fear and betrayal. You're asking me to die, Elna. You're asking me to sacrifice myself for your mistakes. They were our mistakes, she hissed. You agreed to the ritual. You took the wealth. You enjoyed the life it gave us. This is the price we pay. That night, as Peter slept fitfully in their bed, Elna prepared for what had to be done. She dressed in the ceremonial beads and pointed the Njoku sigils onto her skin, just as she had done years ago. The serpent mark on her wrist pulsed with approval, as if guiding her hand. Elna entered the room quietly, a shadow flickering in the candlelight. Peter stared, opening his eyes to see her standing over him, a dagger carved from the sacred ebony in her hand. Elna, what are you doing? He asked, his voice hoarse with fear. Tears streaming down her face as she whispered, Forgive me, Peter. Before he could move, she plunged the dagger into his chest, piercing his heart. His eyes widened in shock and pain, and he gasped her name one last time before falling still. The air in the room shifted immediately. The storm outside calmed, and the serpent mark on Elna's wrist faded into nothingness. The spirits were appeased for now. Elna wrapped Peter's body in ceremonial cloth and carried him to an abandoned cave in the forest. There, she laid him to rest, surrounding his body with offerings of wine, herbs, and gold to ensure the spirit's satisfaction. When she returned home, Elias was waiting for her. Concern etched into his face. Ma, where is Papa? He asked, his voice trembling. Elna forced herself to meet his gaze, her expression blank. He left, Elias. He couldn't handle the pressure of our life. He disappeared into the night. Elias' face fell, disbelief and grief washing over him. He wouldn't just leave us. That's not who he is. Sometimes, Elna said softly, her voice breaking, we never truly know the ones we love. From that day forward, he maintained the lie, weaving a story of abandonment for anyone who cared to ask. In the eyes of the world, Peter had vanished, leaving his wife and son to fend for themselves. But the truth lingered, a dark shadow in the corners of her home. Elna bore the weight of her sin in silence, knowing that the spirits were never truly satisfied. And as Elias grew, strong and defiant, she couldn't shake the feeling that the Njoku would one day return, not for her, but for him. Elna's heart ached with the knowledge that Elias, her only hope, the miracle child, was untouchable by the spirit. They could no longer claim him, no longer use him to fulfill their unquenchable thirst for sacrifice. But the spirit had been appeased by Peter's death. But now, Elna had hoped that she could go on, that her sins would remain hidden beneath layers of wealth and lies. But the air in the home was heavy with the guilt of what she had done. The serpent mark on her wrist had faded, but it will always be there, a reminder of the price she had paid. However, even as Elias grew older, Elna could feel the looming presence of the spirit, ever watchful, never satisfied. One night, she lay awake in bed, her mind spiraling with regret and fear. She realized something. She was still alive, and the spirit would not let her go. She knew that Njoku had a long history of vengeance. They had let her live for this long, only to ensure she would eventually bear the weight of her decision. But how could she prevent it? The answer came to her in a way she never expected. In the years that followed Peter's death, Elna became distant, her mind clouded with the haunting thoughts that the spirit would return. One evening, she encountered a man, Wazi, a merchant. He was charming and bold, his presence magnetic. There was something about him that captivated her, something that both terrified and excited her. Elna's heart was still bound to Peter in some way, yet it was undeniable. She was done, and the spirit had no use for her unless she brought another soul into her life. She was desperate to protect Elias, and the only way she could see to that was to have another child, one who might not be marked by the Njoku, one who could take her place if the spirit demanded it. One night, in a swell of passion and desperation, Elna and Wazi's affair began. She knew the risk, but the fear of her fate overshadowed everything else. Months passed, and Elna's worst fear were realized. She was pregnant once again, this time with Wazi's child. But there was something different about this pregnancy. Unlike Elias, who had been a symbol of purity and grace, this child felt different. The air around her seemed to shift as the baby grew. Elna kept the pregnancy secret from Elias and Wazi, telling no one, even though her body betrayed her. The whispers of the spirits grew louder, their demands more insistent. They knew, of course, of her affair. It was a violation of the sacred bond she had made with them, a further betrayal of the pact that had already cost so much. But Elias was still untouched, and the Njoku spirit had no use for him. It was the unborn child of Wazi's, Elna's second attempt at defiance, that would be their focus. Elna had borne her second child in silence, the weight of her decision pressing down on her shoulder like an unforgiving storm. The child, a boy named Orji, seemed to be the answer to her desperate prayers. But there was no joy in his breath, only an overwhelming sense of dread. She brought the child home to the house that was once filled with laughter, now shadowed by the dark history of her actions. Elias had sensed the shift in the air immediately, as though the house itself had changed. His sharp instinct told him something was amiss, but he said nothing. His mother's coldness, a distant gaze, told him all he needed to know. In the quiet hours of the night, when the winds hollowed outside and the moon cast a pale light over the earth, Elna stood by Orji's crib. The spirit had not let her go. He had not been satisfied with Peter's life, nor with the ritual sacrifices she had made. No, he had returned for Orji, the child of another man, the child born from her affair, the child who was to be the next offering. The air in the room grew thick, the scent of incense heavy with ancient power. Elna's body trembled as she felt the spirit's presence seep into the walls of the house, cold and malevolent. She knew what they wanted. They would not rest until the child was sacrificed, his life taken to seal their pact. Elna had always been able to quiet the voices before, to push the spirits back when they demanded a price. But this time was different. Orji was not like Elias. The boy had not been born under the same stars, had not been marked by the purity that shielded her son. The spirit hungered for him, and Elna had no choice but to obey. With shaking hands, she reached for the ceremonial dagger, its blade glinting in the moonlight. She stood over Orji's crib, ready to carry out the final act, her heart heavy with sorrow and guilt. But just as she raised the blade, a sound stopped her, a voice low and filled with quiet strength. The curse that haunted Elna and her family was not simply a matter of ritual sacrifice or appeasing vengeful spirits. It was a bond, a centuries-old pact, sealed by blood and darkness, woven through generations of Elna's bloodline. The Njoku spirit, the ancient deities that had given her the power to create wealth, were not just malevolent forces. They were bound by a deeper, darker force, the very essence of greed, power and sacrifice. Their influence stretched back through her ancestors, chaining her and every descendant to their demons. When Elna had tried to escape to the spirit's reach, he had always come for her family, forcing her into new sacrifices. But Elias, the child born of both Elna's blood and some greater force, was untouchable. His spirit was pure, his fate not written in the same way. However, this purity did not make him immune to the curse, rather, it made him the key to unlocking it. But to truly break the curse, Elias had to face it head-on, understanding his true power and confronting the dark forces that held him and his family hostage. It all began the day Elias was born. The madman's prophecy, the baby will not walk in their path, was more than a warning. It was a clue to the ancient truth that Elias was not meant to follow the same destructive path his mother had chosen. The spirit recognized something in him that was different, a mark, a latent power that not even Elna fully understood. But for Elias to fully harness this power, He needed to unearth his heritage, the bloodline that had cursed his family. He had to confront the source of the curse itself, which was rooted not in the spirit, but in an ancient forgotten pact made long before Elna's time. As Elias grew, he became more attuned to the whispers in the air, the subtle, otherworldly sensation that always surrounded his family. He sensed the spirit, even when they were not physically present, and felt their rage and desperation. The mark that had protected him, the untouchability, was not a gift of a blessing but the sign of something far more dangerous. He was born of two worlds, one where the Njoku spirits had control, and another where the power of the earth, the ancestors and forces far older than the spirits themselves, had granted him the strength to resist their pull. To fully break the curse, Elias had to confront the spirits directly. He could no longer hide from them or hope that his mere presence would protect him. One night, the spirits came to join him, whispering from the shadows, manifesting in his dreams, calling him to come to them. At first, Elias was terrified. He did not know how to face them. His fear came from a place of deep inherited guilt, his mother's sins, his family's past. But the spirits were not simply trying to control him. They wanted him to acknowledge them, to accept the deal his mother had made. When Elias ventured into the forest one fateful night, he encountered the spirits in their full terrifying form. They appeared as shadows, their eyes glowing with a sickly light, their voice a chorus of hunger and greed. "You are the one," they hissed, "the last of your line. The price must be paid. Your blood is ours." Elias, shaken but resolute, stood before them. "I am not the one you seek. I will not be part of your pact. I will not give you my soul." The spirit laughed, their voices like the sound of wind tearing through the trees. "You are a fool, boy. You cannot escape the chains of your blood. You cannot defy the price." Elias' heart pounded as he felt the weight of their power pressing against him. But then, as he closed his eyes and remembered his mother's sacrifice, the pain of losing his father, the agony of their choices, something inside him shifted. He tapped into the power that had always been inside him, the untapped strength of the land, of the ancestors, and the very essence of life itself. The spirits may have marked his family with blood, but they had never had dominion over the earth. With a deep breath, Elias opened his eyes. "I may be bound by your blood, but I am not bound by your will. You do not control me." Suddenly, the spirits recoiled, the dark energy around them shuddering. A great pressure, like a heavy weight, bore down on Elias, but he stood firm, his chest rising and falling in slow, deliberate breaths. The spirits roared. Their fury erupted like a thunderstorm. "You think you can defy us, child? You think you can break our bond?" Elias clenched his fists, and with a single shout, he invoked the power that had been gifted to him, the strength of his ancestors, the power of the earth itself. He drew on the energy of the land, of the roots and beneath his feet, and the spirits began to scream, their forms flickering and distorting as they tried to hold on to him. But the earth, alive, ancient, and vast, was stronger than their malevolent power. In that moment, Elias did not just reject the spirit, he severed the bond. With one final cry, he shattered the pact, dissolving the hold he had on his family's bloodline. But before now, when Elna wanted to sacrifice for G, Elias shouted, "Ma, no!" Elna froze, her heart stuttered in her chest, her breath caught in her throat. She slowly turned around, the blade still clutched in her trembling hand, to see Elias standing in the doorway, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. "Elias, no! You weren't supposed to see this," Elna whispered, her voice breaking. "You were going to kill him?" Elias' voice was calm but heavy with accusations. He stepped into the room, his eyes never leaving the blade in her hand. Elna's face twisted in a mix of fear and desperation. "I have no choice, Elias. The spirit will destroy us all if I don't. They have taken everything already, and now they want him." She nodded towards Oji, Her voice filled with a hollow ache. It's the last sacrifice. If I don't do this, they will come for us. For you. No. Elias' voice was firm, unwavering. You don't have to do this, Ma. You never did. Elna's eyes filled with tears, her vision blurring. I thought I was protecting you. I thought if I gave them what they wanted, they would leave us alone. But they don't care, Elias. They don't care about anything but blood. I can't stop them. I tried to make it right, but I failed. Elias walked closer, his feet steady and resolute. You are wrong, Ma. You didn't fail. You didn't have to make this deal with them. You didn't have to kill Papa or anyone else. You did this to yourself, and now we have to stop it. The room grew colder, the air thick with the spirit's fury. Their whispers now sharp and loud, filling the space like 1,000 voices echoing in the walls, and felt them closing in, the weight of their presence pressing down on them. Elias moved to stand in front of the crib, his eyes locked on Elna's. If you sacrifice him, he said quietly, you will never be free. The spirits will not let us go, Ma. They will keep coming for us, one by one until there is nothing left. Elna staggered back, the dagger slipping from her hand and clattering to the floor. The spirit whispered rose louder, more urgent. They were furious with her disobedience, but Elna could no longer follow through. She had already taken so much from her family. She had already betrayed her son, her husband, and her unborn child. With a broken soul, she fell to her knees before Elias, her hands outstretched in repentance. I'm sorry, Elias. I didn't know how else to stop them. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder, his face etched with sorrow. We don't stop them by giving them more blood. We stop them by facing them. We stop them together. As Elna knelt, the room seemed to shift. The spirits were enraged by her defiance, their presence swelling violently in the shadows. They had never intended for her to break the pact. Her failure would cost them dearly, but more importantly, to cost her. The temperature in the room plummeted. A gust of cold wind blew through the open window, and the candle flame flickered, casting airy shadows on the wall. The whispers of the spirits grew into a deafening roar, their demand clear. You must pay. You must sacrifice to cleanse the blood. But Elias stood firm, his chest rising with determination. He was no longer the innocent child of the past. He was someone greater, someone touched by something far older and more powerful than the spirit could ever comprehend. I am not afraid of you, Elias said, his voice steady, though his eyes burned with an otherworldly light. The spirit recoiled for a moment, sensing its defiance, his purity. He had been marked not by the Njoku spirit, but by something far more ancient, something that had shielded him all along. The spirits wailed in frustration, their anger manifesting in dark clouds that seemed to fill the room, but they could not touch Elias. The dark power that had once bound Elna to them had no hold over him. Ma, it's time, Elias said softly, his gaze never wavering. We end this together. Elna looked at her son, her heart heavy with the guilt of all she had done. But now, for the first time in years, she saw a glimmer of hope. Elias had broken free from the curse that plagued their family. Together they could confront the spirit, end their reign of terror, and finally undo the horrors of the past. With Elias' strength guiding her, Elna made her choice. The sacrifice would not happen tonight. Instead, they will face the spirit once and for all, and take back control of their own fate. It was not easy. The moment Elias broke the curse, the very air seemed to snap like a taut rope, and for a brief instant, the world stood still. The spirits wailed, their power retreating into the darkness from which they had come. But Elias was left breathless, his body aching as though he has been torn apart. The power that surged through him was overwhelming. The spirit did not vanish entirely. Some of their influence remained in the world beyond the reach of Elias, but still knocking in the shadows. The Njoku may have been banished from his family, but their legacy will never fully disappear. As Elias stood in the clearing, exhausted but free, the weight of what he had done began to sink in. He had saved his family, but the price had been steep. The spirit had been banished, but not without leaving their mark on him.